My home heat was failing. Posted shut-off demand at the HOA bulletin board. Middle of the night, cold and dark alone. Linda Barrett, the HOA president, posted that demand and ordered me to stop generator use immediately, as if shutting off my generator was just another HOA rule, even though my heat depended on it. A formal notice PDF came with it, the same demand reduced to a document that could be saved, printed, and carried into a record. "I'm keeping the heat on, finally," someone fought back. Once the community systems were traced end to end, the HOA's quiet hours claim had to reconcile with a single dependency point they didn't control. The record would reflect whatever the connections proved, no speeches required. The ice storm didn't arrive like weather. It arrived like a decision. 1 minute the neighborhood was quiet under a thin crust of frost. The next, the wind started to hiss against the siding, and the trees made that tight, glassy sound like they were rubbing bones together. I woke up to a hard pop somewhere outside a transformer or a branch letting go, and then the house went dead. No furnace fan, no microwave clock, no hallway nightlight, just darkness and the slow, creeping cold that comes when a place stops breathing. From the garage wall, my generator answered before I even got both feet on the floor. The automatic transfer clicked, and a second later, the engine caught. Not loud, not dramatic, just a steady, mechanical hum that said, "We're not freezing tonight." Behind me, my wife's voice came soft from the bed. "Power out," I said. I pulled on a sweatshirt and headed for the kitchen barefoot on tile that already felt colder than it should have. The wind pushed a sheet of ice pellets against the window. Streetlights were gone. The whole HOA loop outside looked like a black and white photo. "Is it safe?" she asked. "Safer than sitting in the dark," I said. "Stay under the quilt. I'll check the panel." I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer by muscle memory. The beam cut across the kitchen chair's countertop, the stack of mail I hadn't opened, and the little calendar magnet with the HOA logo that someone once handed me like it was a medal. A year ago, they had quiet hours printed in bold on every newsletter. After 10 p.m., after 7 a.m., no unapproved noise disturbances. It was written like law. I'd gotten a complaint once back in fall when I ran the generator for 20 minutes to test the load. 20 minutes. Middle of the afternoon. Clear sky. Still got a warning email. Still got a reminder that consistency maintains property values. I hadn't replied. There are arguments you don't win with words. The refrigerator kicked on. The furnace tried to start, hesitated, then held. Good. The generator had the essentials. The sound filled the house the way a heartbeat fills a body. You notice it when you're afraid it might stop. I walked to the back door and looked through the glass. The yard was hard white and slick, the fence line blurred by sleet. The HOA street beyond was empty. No headlights, no movement, just wind and ice. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Once, twice, a third time like someone tapping a finger impatiently. I picked it up. The screen lit the kitchen in blue. An email from the HOA. Subject line in all caps, demand stop generator use immediately. For a second I just stared at it like my eyes had misread the word, because it didn't belong in a night like this. Demand, I said out loud, tasting how ridiculous it sounded in my own kitchen. My wife's voice floated in from the hall, thin with sleep. "Who is it, HOA?" I said. That got her fully awake. Now I didn't answer. I tapped the email. Click. At the top, the sender was the association's general inbox. No name, no hello. Just a block of text, clean and cold. It didn't ask if anyone had power. It didn't ask if anyone had heat. It didn't ask if the storm had knocked lines down, or if the county had declared anything, or if the roads were passable. It didn't even pretend to care. It said my generator violated quiet hours. It said immediate compliance was required. It said failure to comply would result in fines and further action. Further action. In the middle of an ice storm. I felt my jaw tighten in a way that made my teeth ache. My wife came into the kitchen wrapped in a robe, hair a mess, eyes squinting at the screen. "They want you to shut it off." "Immediately," I said. "That's insane." Her voice rose before she could stop it. "We'll lose heat." "I know." She looked past me toward the dark window. "Everyone's out. Looks like it." "So why you?" she said. "Why are they texting you? How do they even know yours is running?" That question slid under my ribs and stayed there. Because the truth was, unless someone was standing in my driveway with a clipboard at 2 in the morning, they shouldn't have known. I scrolled. There was an attachment, something labeled "Formal Notice" as a PDF, like they were serving court papers from a warm office while the neighborhood iced over. The email ended with a line that made my hands go still. "Compliance is expected. This is a demand." I turned the phone slightly, reading it again slower, to make sure it really said what it said. It did. Mark, my wife said, and now her voice had that edge it gets when she's thinking ahead. "If you shut it off, what happens to the freezer?" "The pipes, I know," I repeated. "I know." I set the phone down and stared at it like it was a live thing. The generator kept running steady and loyal. The furnace vent pushed out a thin ribbon of warmth, like the house was trying to defend itself. Outside, the wind kept scraping ice across the glass. Inside, the HOA had chosen this moment to remind me who they thought they were. My wife leaned in her hand on the counter. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I listened. The hum. The wind. The soft tick of ice sliding off the gutter. Then I picked up the phone again and looked at the subject line one more time. Demand stop generator use immediately. In the middle of a storm, they weren't asking if I was okay. They were asking if I would obey, and for the first time that night, the cold in the house wasn't coming from outside. The phone rang just as the gray light started leaking into the kitchen. Not sunrise, just that thin, exhausted daylight that follows a night like this when the storm hasn't left, but has decided to watch you instead. I hadn't really slept. I drifted in and out, waking whenever the wind shoved ice against the siding or the generator shifted its rhythm under load. Outside, it kept running. Steady. Patient. Inside, the house felt colder than it should have, even with the heat pushing through the vents. The tile under my feet bit back when I crossed the kitchen. I poured the last of the coffee from the pot I'd been reheating since before midnight. It tasted burned and thin, but it was warm, and that was enough. The phone rang again. I looked at the screen and felt my shoulders tighten before I even answered. Linda Barrett, HOA president. I didn't lift it to my ear. I set it on the counter and hit speaker. "Hello," I said. Her voice came through crisp and irritated, like she'd been awake for hours, but not for the same reasons I had. "Mark," she said. "No greeting, no small talk. We issued you a demand last night. I received it. And yet your generator is still running." "It is," I said, "because the power is out." She exhaled sharply. "You are in violation of quiet hours." I glanced at the window. The world outside was a blur of white and gray ice crawling down the glass like veins. Quiet hours don't mean much when it's 15 degrees and dropping. Our rules apply uniformly, she said. Uniform enforcement is how we maintain order and property values. There it was. Property values. The magic phrase. The one that always came out when common sense ran out. Behind me, my wife sat at the table with a blanket around her shoulders, watching my face. She shook her head slowly, already angry. "Linda," I said, "it's an emergency." "I'm aware of the weather," she snapped, then paused just long enough and said, "Your generator is interfering with our backup pump system." The sentence landed in the room like something dropped. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to make sure I'd heard it correctly. "My generator is interfering with what I asked." "Our backup pump system," she repeated more carefully this time. My wife leaned forward. I felt my pulse start to climb. "Okay," I said. "Let's slow down." "Backup pumps for what?" "That's not relevant. It became relevant the moment you said my generator affects it." She shifted tone, slipping into that polished HOA cadence. "There are shared systems in the community that require stability. Unapproved equipment creates disruptions." "Unapproved," I said, "or inconvenient?" "Mark," she said, sharper. "Now this is not a discussion. You were issued a demand. You are required to comply." I rested my hand on the counter, fingers splayed. "If your backup pumps are actually backup, why do they care what my generator is doing?" Silence. Not the quick, dismissive kind. The other kind. The one where someone is deciding what not to say. "That's not how these systems work," she said finally. "So how do they work?" "They work," she snapped, "when homeowners follow the rules." I waited. The generator hummed on even and unconcerned, like it had no idea it was being dragged into HOA politics. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice steady, "do your backup pumps depend on my generator?" "No," she said immediately. Too immediately. "Then why does it matter?" "It matters because—" She stopped herself. "Because noise complaints have been logged. In the middle of an ice storm." "Yes." "From who that information is confidential." Of course it was. I took a breath through my nose. "Send me everything in writing. You already have the notice." "Send it again," I said, "with your name on it." "I don't need send it," I repeated. "If this is serious enough to threaten fines during a power outage, it deserves a paper trail." She made a sound that wasn't quite a sigh. "You are being difficult." "I'm being precise," I said. "There's a difference." Another pause. Outside, the wind scraped ice off the gutter. Inside, my wife mouthed backup pumps at me, disbelief written across her face. "You will receive a formal notice," Linda said. "Consider this your final opportunity to comply voluntarily." "Fine," I said. "I'll look for it." I ended the call before she could add another word. The kitchen felt smaller after that, like the air had thickened. My wife stared at the phone. "Did she really say your generator is interfering with their backup pumps?" "She did." "That makes no sense." "No," I said. "It makes too much sense." There was a knock at the back door. 3 quick taps. Firm. Familiar. I opened it, and cold air rushed in. Earl Madden stood on the step, hood pulled low, scarf wrapped tight. He didn't come inside right away. He looked past me, eyes landing on the phone still glowing on the counter. "HOA?" he asked. "Linda," I said. He nodded once. "She tell you to shut it down. She demanded it," I said. "Said my generator is interfering with their backup pump system." Earl's eyes flicked toward the street, then back to me. He lowered his voice. Because it is. My chest tightened. Explain. They call it backup, he said. Doesn't mean it's independent. I've seen boards tie systems together when they think nobody's watching. They assume people won't ask questions in bad weather. And if I shut mine off, I said slowly, something else goes dark. Earl didn't argue. He didn't need to. Don't do anything without paperwork, he said. And don't carry responsibility that isn't yours. A buzz cut through the air. My phone lit up again. New email. Subject line in all caps like it could force compliance by volume alone. Formal notice, demand to cease generator operation. I stared at it, then looked at Earl. He nodded once. There it is. Outside, the storm pressed in. Inside, the generator kept humming. And somewhere between the demand and the silence that followed, I realized this wasn't about noise at all. By late morning, the storm had settled into a heavy, watching silence. The HOA loop looked like a frozen cul-de-sac in a snow globe. Roads, erased tire tracks, smoothed flat branches, bowed and locked in ice. Nothing moved except the wind, and even that felt cautious, like it didn't want to make a mistake. Inside, my living room had turned into a temporary command post. Blankets piled on the couch, a lantern on the coffee table. My laptop open and balanced just right so the camera wouldn't show the mess. The generator hummed outside, steady and distant, like it was waiting for instructions. The email had come through an hour earlier. Emergency board session Zoom. Noon sharp. I clicked the link 5 minutes early. One by one, faces appeared in small boxes, neighbors I recognized, some I didn't. A couple of older couples bundled in sweaters. A man sitting in his truck with the engine off. Someone framed by candlelight. The people without power were easy to spot. Linda Barrett joined last. Her square snapped into place, crisp and well lit. Blazer, hair neat, calm smile. She looked like someone giving a presentation, not someone riding out an ice storm. Good afternoon, she said. Thank you for joining on short notice. I watched the participant list. 12 residents, 5 board members. Enough to make it official. Linda shared her screen. The HOA letterhead filled the grid logo, bold title, formal language. The same demand I'd read twice already. As you know, she said, a homeowner has failed to comply with an association demand regarding generator use. I raised my hand icon. She didn't acknowledge it. There have been multiple complaints, she continued. Noise violations, safety concerns, community systems that require stability. Stability. Again. I unmuted myself. Linda, I have a question. Her eyes flicked to my name. We'll address questions at the end. This is relevant, I said. Very relevant. A few faces shifted. Someone nodded. Someone else frowned. I asked it anyway. What do your backup pumps run on? The room went still. For half a second, nobody spoke, not even Linda. Then my screen flashed. You have been muted by the host. The words sat there, plain and final. I stared at them, then looked up at Linda's face. She didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. Let's keep this orderly, she said smoothly. We're not going to have interruptions. I wasn't interrupting, I said, even though she couldn't hear me. I clicked unmute. Muted by host. I tried again. Same result. A woman on the call unmuted herself. Why did you mute him? Linda smiled without warmth. We're staying on agenda. What agenda? The woman asked. People don't have heat. This meeting is about compliance, Linda replied, not individual circumstances. I typed into the chat. Backup pumps run on what? Please answer. The message appeared. then vanished. Chat disabled by host. A low, bitter laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. My wife, standing just behind the couch, put a hand on my shoulder. Linda continued like nothing had happened. The board will now vote on enforcement measures. Craig, sitting beside her in his square, spoke first. Approve. Mary hesitated. She looked tired. Approve temporarily, she said, eyes darting away from the camera. Another board member followed. Approve. Linda nodded. Motion passes. That was it. No discussion. No explanation. No answer. She leaned closer to the camera. Mark Halverson, she said, voice firm and public, you have been issued a lawful demand. Continued non-compliance will result in daily fines effective immediately. An older man unmuted himself. This feels wrong, he said. It's an emergency. Linda didn't miss a beat. We maintain standards in all conditions. Standards. That was the word she chose. I felt something shift in my chest, not heat, not panic. Something colder, clearer. I stopped trying to unmute. I stopped typing. I just watched. Linda wrapped up the meeting with a practiced smile. A formal notice will be emailed and posted. Thank you for your cooperation. One by one, squares disappeared. People logged off quickly, like they didn't want to be caught lingering. I stayed until the last second, watching Linda's face, wondering how long she thought she could keep the real question buried. Then I closed the laptop. The room felt louder without the voices. The lantern buzzed faintly. The generator hummed on outside, patient and indifferent. My wife leaned down beside me. They're scared you'll say it out loud, she whispered. I nodded once. If their pumps were truly backup, my generator wouldn't matter. If my generator mattered, their backup wasn't backup. I stood and walked to the hallway. The electrical panel waited there, metal door cold under my fingers. I wasn't going to argue with Linda on Zoom. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do exactly what she demanded, nothing more, nothing less. I opened my phone and typed a single line, slow and deliberate, like a record meant to last. I will isolate the generator to in-house essentials only. No external feed, no shared load, no accidental help. If their system failed after that, it wouldn't be because I touched it. It would be because it had been leaning on mine all along. At 2:17 a.m., the house had a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet of sleep, the quiet of everything waiting to see what fails next. The storm had eased just enough to let the cold settle in. It sat on the roof, on the cars, on the street like a heavy lid. When I stepped into the garage, my breath fogged instantly, and the concrete floor felt like it was pulling heat straight out of my bones. The generator was out back, still running, still steady, still faithful. The sound seeped through the wall, low and constant, like a reminder that we were only warm because a machine was willing to work. I stood in front of the electrical panel with my flashlight angled up the beam, trembling slightly as my hand tightened. The HOA's words replayed in my head like a recording that wouldn't stop. Demand. Immediately. Comply. They'd muted me. Disabled chat. Voted to fine me. And not once had they answered a simple question about backup pumps. I could picture Linda's face on the Zoom call, smooth, bright, unbothered, while my neighbors sat in the dark. That image sat in my chest like ice. From the hallway behind me, I heard my wife's soft footsteps, careful on the cold floor. "You're up," she said quietly. "I couldn't sleep," I replied. She stopped at the doorway, pulling her robe tighter. The garage light was off. Only the flashlight lit the panel and the edges of her face. You're not going to do something stupid, are you? I looked at her. No. She didn't move, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. They want you to shut it down. They want me to shut it down, I repeated steady. And you're... what she asked. You're going to shut it down. I stared at the breakers and the labels I'd written in black marker years ago. Furnace, fridge, kitchen, outlets, lights. Simple, honest names. Things that kept a house alive. I'm going to comply, I said. Her brow pinched. Mark. Listen, I said, turning slightly so she could see what I was looking at. I'm not touching their equipment. I'm not going near the clubhouse. I'm not doing anything that could be twisted. I swallowed once, feeling the dryness in my throat. I didn't touch their equipment. I said the words coming out calm and exact. I just stopped being part of it. She blinked at me, and I could see her trying to understand what that meant. I opened the panel door fully. Cold metal clicked against cold metal. Inside were the breakers, the main, the subfeed lines. Everything that decided where power went when the generator ran. My setup wasn't fancy, but it was clean, legal, permitted. The kind of thing you install when you've spent your life fixing other people's mistakes and you don't want any of your own. I checked my phone for the time again, like 2:17 mattered. Like the clock was making a record. The storm outside sighed against the garage door. I took a breath and reached for the external feed. It was a small breaker labeled in my own handwriting outside/AUX. Years ago, I'd wired it as an option, a way to stabilize a couple of non-essential lines if needed, the kind of thing that could help when you had a neighbor in trouble. It wasn't meant to power the world. It was meant to give flexibility. It was also the only part of my system that could possibly matter to anyone beyond my walls. Linda's voice came back to me sharp, careless. Your generator is interfering with our backup pump system. Interfering. I flipped the breaker down. The motion was small, almost delicate, but the sound click felt louder than it should have in the frozen air. For a second, nothing changed. The generator kept running. The house stayed warm. The lights in my garage stayed on. But something shifted in the silence outside, like the neighborhood itself had noticed a thread being pulled. My wife stepped closer. What did you just do? I isolated it, I said. In-house only. She stared at the panel, then at me. So, we still have heat? Yes. And everyone else? I'm not powering anyone else, I said. Not intentionally, not accidentally. Just us. She was quiet for a beat, and in that beat, I heard the generator's hum change slightly lighter, like it had lost a burden it hadn't asked for. I pulled my phone out and opened the Notes app. My hands were steady now. 2:17 a.m. isolated generator to in-house panel only. External feed off. I added a second line because I wanted it clean. No contact with HOA property. No contact with HOA equipment. Then I saved it. Screen dimmed. Record made. We stood there in the garage listening. The hum outside. The faint creak of ice contracting. The far-off snap of a branch giving up. And then quiet. A deeper quiet. The kind that spreads outward. It wasn't immediate like a fuse blowing. It was more like a city losing power block by block. A softness. A hush. My wife hugged herself. It got quieter, she said. Yeah, I answered. Back inside, I didn't go back to bed. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and watched the time crawl forward in minutes that felt thick. The house stayed warm. The refrigerator kept running. The furnace cycled on and off like normal. At 2:41, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Do you know what happened? At 2:43, another. Our system is down. Call me. At 2:44, a third, this time from the HOA email address in text form, like they were trying every door at once. Immediate response required. The storm hadn't changed. The temperature hadn't risen. Nothing about the night had improved. Only one thing had changed. I stared at the messages until the screen went dark again. Then I typed one reply, slow enough that there was no mistake in it, no emotion they could point to later. I followed your rules. I hit send and set the phone down beside my coffee. Outside, the generator kept humming, steady, honest, and suddenly only mine. Morning came without color. The sky was a flat, milky gray, and ice fog hung low enough to blur the houses into pale shapes. Sound carried strangely, like the neighborhood itself was wrapped in cotton. I pulled my collar up and stepped onto the driveway, boots crunching carefully over frozen grit, every step deliberate. The HOA clubhouse sat dark at the end of the loop. No lights, no heat, just a stiff flag locked in ice. A handful of neighbors clustered near the bulletin board, shoulders hunched, breath puffing white. From a distance, it looked like a small crowd. Up close, it felt like a waiting room. New paper had been stapled crookedly to the board. Temporary water advisory. Limit use until further notice. Below it, another notice tried to soften the message with words like precautionary and temporary, but the staples were still shiny. This hadn't been planned. It had been rushed. A man beside me rubbed his forehead over and over like he could erase the night by friction alone. Doug. I knew him from summer barbecues. The pumps quit, he said quietly. Backup pumps, I asked. Doug hesitated, eyes flicking toward the clubhouse. That's what they're calling it. A car crunched into the lot. Linda Barrett stepped out, flanked by two board members. She looked tired but controlled. The kind of tired that comes from managing a mess, not living in one. Mark, she said, spotting me immediately. Linda. Her gaze slid to the advisory and back. We need to talk. You already talked, I said. Last night. She ignored that. We're requesting cooperation. I raised an eyebrow. Requesting. Craig cleared his throat. The community needs stability. Put it in writing, I said. Mary frowned. This isn't the time. It's the only time, I replied. Signed. Dated. Clear responsibility. Linda's jaw tightened. You're being difficult. I'm being exact. Wind pushed ice fog across the lot, and the little group of neighbors drew closer without meaning to. Everyone could feel something slipping. Craig stepped forward too fast. When your generator was isolated, systems failed. Which systems, I asked. Silence. Then Tom, standing just behind Linda, muttered, When you shut down, the backup line went dead. The words landed heavy. Doug's head snapped up. What Linda spun toward Tom. Enough! But it was already out. So the backup isn't independent, I said calmly. Linda's voice sharpened. You don't understand how interconnected I understand exactly, I said. You leaned on my equipment and called it backup. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down, then up again, changing tone mid-breath. We are asking you to assist temporarily for community safety. There it is, I said. Asking. I pulled my phone out and started recording without comment. Say it again. Craig swallowed. We're requesting cooperation. For what I asked specifically, Linda exhaled through her teeth. To restore water pressure and responsibility, I asked. No one answered. I nodded once and walked away toward the post office. The door chimed weakly as I stepped inside, warmth fogging my glasses. A line of bundled residents stood quietly clutching mail slips like proof of normalcy. My phone vibrated. An email. New subject line. Request for cooperation community systems. I opened it slowly, reading every word. No demands, no threats. Just a careful request stripped of authority. Before replying, I saved the recording and named the file plainly. Received HOA request. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, letting the warmth sink into my hands, listening to the low murmur of people trading half information and quiet worry. Someone mentioned frozen pipes on the east side. Someone else complained about no notice, no warning, no explanation. Every sentence circled the same missing center, how a system advertised as resilient had folded the instant a single homeowner stepped out of line. When I stepped back outside, Linda was still near the board phone, pressed to her ear, posture tight. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The shift had already happened. Words like demand and enforcement had vanished, replaced by request and cooperation. It wasn't humility. It was exposure. I paused at the edge of the lot and looked back once at the notices fluttering slightly in the cold, at neighbors reading them with new understanding. Nothing had broken because I followed the rules. What broke had already been fragile. Accountability had finally found daylight, and it wasn't interested in hiding. The diner's neon sign was dark, but the door was unlocked. A handwritten sheet of printer paper was taped to the glass, the edges curling from the cold. Open cash only, limited menu powered by generator. Inside the place smelled like coffee that had been kept warm too long, and bacon that had been cooked in batches. The lights were dim, not because they were trying to be cozy, but because every watt mattered. A small portable heater sat near the counter, fighting a losing battle against the draft each time the door opened. Still, it was the only warm public room for miles. Men in heavy jackets sat with their hands wrapped around mugs. A couple of older women shared a booth, whispering like the storm could hear them. Near the window, two guys I recognized from the HOA loop leaned in close, talking fast. When I stepped in the door, chime gave a tired little jingle, and half the heads turned like they were checking who else had survived the night. I slid into a booth by myself and let the warmth hit my face. My phone buzzed immediately, another HOA email, another subject line trying to sound like authority. Across the aisle, I heard the sentence that had started traveling faster than the plows. HOA pumps died, one of the guys said. Like dead. No pressure. Nothing. The other one snorted. They're telling people it's Mark's fault. Generator interference. You hear that? My jaw tightened, but I kept my eyes on the coffee cup the waitress set down in front of me. Thanks, I said. She nodded. You from Silver Creek Ridge? Yeah. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Everybody is today. At the counter, a man was talking loud enough to make sure the whole room caught it. Linda says the homeowner refused to comply, he announced. Now everyone's suffering. A few people murmured. A few rolled their eyes. One older guy in a veteran cap stared into his mug, like he'd seen this kind of blame game before. I took one sip. Hot, bitter, real. My phone buzzed again. Then again. And then through the diner window, I saw the thing that made the room's chatter change pitch. A city/county SUV crawled down the icy street and turned toward the clubhouse. No HOA logo. No neighbor's truck. Official. Behind it, a second vehicle followed, slower, careful. Conversations in the diner thinned as people watched through the glass. "About time," someone muttered. I set cash on the table, pulled my coat tighter, and stepped back into the cold. The walk from the diner to the clubhouse wasn't far, but the wind made it feel like I was crossing open water. Ice fog drifted in sheets. The bulletin board was still plastered with advisories, and the small crowd had grown into something that looked like a line outside a courthouse. The city/county inspector stood near the clubhouse entrance with a clipboard tucked under one arm. He wasn't dressed like he belonged to the HOA. No blazer, no logo, just a heavy jacket, gloves, and the kind of face that didn't soften for excuses. Linda was there, of course. She had positioned herself at the front, like the problem was a stage, and she was the only one qualified to speak. Craig hovered to her right. Mary stood back, tight-lipped. Tom kept his eyes on the ground. When the inspector looked up, Linda moved immediately. "Thank you for coming," she said brightly. "We're dealing with an urgent infrastructure situation caused by a resident's non-compliance." The inspector didn't return her smile. "Name?" She blinked. "Excuse me." "Your name," he repeated, pen already moving. "Linda Barrett, HOA president." He wrote it down without comment. "What infrastructure?" "Our pump system," Linda said, voice gaining confidence as she spoke. "Backup pumps." The inspector's eyes flicked over the crowd. "Backup for what? For community water pressure," she said. "Our system lost stability when one homeowner ran unauthorized equipment." She nodded toward me like I was a piece of evidence. A couple of residents looked my way, some with curiosity, some with irritation, most with exhaustion. The inspector turned to me. "Sir Mark Halverson," I said. "Did you damage anything?" he asked, blunt. "No," I said. "I haven't touched HOA equipment. I stayed on my property." Linda cut in. "He admitted he shut down his generator after we demanded compliance, and then I didn't shut down my generator," I said, keeping my voice even. "I isolated it to my in-house panel." The inspector looked at Linda. "You demanded what exactly?" Linda lifted her chin. "We demanded he cease generator operation due to quiet hours violations and community impact." "Do you have that in writing?" the inspector asked. Her mouth tightened. "Yes." I pulled out my phone. "I do," I said. "Demand email, formal notice, and my generator log." The inspector's attention sharpened slightly, like the conversation had finally reached something solid. I stepped forward and held out my phone. I didn't wave it. I didn't perform. I just offered the facts. He took it, scrolling with a gloved thumb. His eyes moved fast, practiced. He read the subject line first, then the body. He paused on the word demand like it had weight. Then he handed the phone back. "You have the log." I opened the Notes app and showed him the time-stamped entries when the generator started. When I isolated the external feed, what loads remained. Linda's voice rose. "He's manipulating his own records." "We have, ma'am," the inspector said. Without looking at her, "I'm speaking to him." The crowd got quieter. People leaned in. You could feel the shift, like a room full of folks recognizing that this wasn't an HOA meeting anymore. The inspector turned back to Linda. "Show me the backup source." Linda's smile strained. "It's internal." "Show me," he repeated. Craig stepped forward, hands up like he was calming a dog. "We can explain." "Show me," the inspector said again, and the third time it wasn't a request. They led him around the side of the clubhouse toward a locked utility area. The crowd followed at a respectful distance, like a tour nobody wanted. I stayed close enough to hear, far enough not to be accused of anything. Linda swiped a key fob, the lock clicking open. Inside was a small utility room with pipes, a panel, and the kind of setup that looked neat until someone asked what it actually did. The inspector scanned the labels, traced a line with his eyes, then turned his head slightly, as if he could already see the answer without touching anything. He looked at Linda. "Where's the independent power source?" Linda's mouth opened. Where is it?" he asked. Craig shifted. Mary swallowed. Tom stared at the floor so hard, it looked like he was trying to disappear through it. The inspector exhaled once slow. Then he turned toward the crowd, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "These aren't backup pumps," he said. "They're dependent pumps." The words hit like a hammer on ice. A murmur rippled through the group. Someone cursed under their breath. Someone else laughed, once sharp and disbelieving. Linda's face tightened into something pale and furious. "That's not it," the inspector cut in. "Backup means independent. This setup relies on external stability. You can't market it as backup and then blame a homeowner when it collapses." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and the sound was small but unmistakable in the cold air. Beep. He held his screen up briefly, then tucked it away. "Inspection notice filed," he said. "Effective immediately." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. Linda looked cornered in a way she couldn't talk her way out of. And for the first time since the storm began, the truth felt warmer than the generator ever had. The envelope didn't arrive with drama. No siren, no knock. Just a plain county seal pressed into the corner, and my name typed cleanly across the front. It landed on the tool bench in my garage, sometime between morning coffee and the slow return of normal power. Notice of hearing. I stood there longer than I needed to, gloves still on, staring at it, like the words might rearrange themselves if I waited. The generator was quiet now, shut down for good, its job finished. The silence in the garage felt heavier than the noise ever had. My wife leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. "That's official," she said. "Yeah," I answered and opened it. Inside was exactly what you'd expect, from the county dates, procedures, attachments. The HOA's written response sat neatly clipped behind the notice. Their attorney's name was printed at the top, someone I'd heard of, someone who specialized in smoothing things over before they turned sharp. What surprised me wasn't what the letter said. It was what it didn't. No accusations, no threats, no insistence that I'd endangered the community. Just careful language about misunderstandings and cooperation, like the storm had been a scheduling conflict instead of a failure. The phone buzzed as I was reading. An email this time, not from the HOA. Dennis Laird. County Compliance. Short message. Polite. Direct. He wanted to review the record before the hearing. He arrived that afternoon in a county SUV, boots crunching lightly as he stepped into the garage. Late 50s, calm eyes, the posture of someone who'd spent years listening to explanations and deciding which ones mattered. "You're Mark," he said, offering a hand. "Yes." He glanced once at the electrical panel, then at the tool bench where the notice lay open. "Mind if we look at this together?" We spread the papers out under the hanging light. The inspection report, the HOA demand email, the formal notice. My generator log, timestamps neat and unemotional. Dennis read without interrupting. When he reached the demand email, he paused. "Stop generator use immediately," he read aloud. "That's their wording." "It is," I said. He nodded once. "If their pumps were truly backup, they wouldn't care what you did." That sentence landed quietly, but it settled something in my chest. "They put it in writing," he continued. "They didn't ask. They demanded. That tells us they knew their system depended on yours." I looked at the email again, seeing it now the way the county would see it, not as a neighbor dispute, but as evidence. Their demand proves they knew they were tied to you, Dennis said. The hearing room 2 days later was small and cold, with folding chairs and a county seal bolted to the wall. It smelled faintly of old coffee and paper. Linda sat at the front table with the HOA counsel posture, straight expression controlled. He shuffled documents without looking at me once. Dennis sat beside me not as an advocate, just as a witness to the process. The hearing officer opened without ceremony. This concerns emergency system compliance and representations made by the Homeowners Association. The HOA counsel spoke first carefully. He said the association had acted in good faith, that emotions were high, that the word demand had been unfortunate. Dennis slid the printed email forward. The officer read the subject line, then looked up. "Is this an official communication from the HOA?" Linda nodded. "Yes." "And the system you described as backup," the officer asked, "was it independent?" There was a pause, just long enough to matter. Dennis spoke evenly. Inspection confirmed it was not. The system relied on external stability. The officer turned another page. And when the homeowner isolated his generator to his own panel, the system failed. "Yes," Dennis said. Linda's counsel finally spoke, voice thin. There was no intent to mislead. The officer didn't argue. She didn't need to. "The determination is straightforward," she said. The HOA failed to maintain an independent backup system while representing it as such. Responsibility rests with the association. Linda's face stayed composed, but something had gone still behind her eyes. A week later, the determination letter arrived. Clear findings, required corrections, deadlines, and one final line that felt heavier than the rest. The HOA president will be placed under administrative review regarding conduct during the emergency event. I read it twice, then set it back on the tool bench where the envelope had first landed. No cheers, no victory speech, just the quiet certainty that their demand, the thing meant to pressure me, had become the record that held them accountable. For the first time since the storm, the air felt warmer. The power came back on a Tuesday afternoon, like it was trying not to make a big deal out of itself. 1 second the house was still running on my generator, steady hum, steady warmth, and the next the hallway lights flickered. The oven clock blinked 12 o'clock, and the furnace fan kicked on with that familiar grid-fed confidence. I stood in the kitchen and listened. No hum, no engine rhythm under the floorboards. Just the normal sounds of a house that wasn't fighting anymore. I walked out to the garage and hit the shutoff the way I always had, careful, practiced, not ceremonial. The generator spun down, coughing once, then falling silent. The quiet that followed wasn't the quiet of fear. It was the quiet of things working the way they were supposed to. I stood there a moment longer than necessary, with my hand resting on the metal casing, feeling the last of the vibration fade. In the corner, the extension cords were coiled neatly, the fuel cans capped and lined up, everything back in its place. My wife stepped in behind me. "It's back?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. She exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time in days. "Good." We didn't talk about Linda. We didn't need to. The county had said what needed to be said, and the HOA was learning the hard way that paper remembers more than people do. A week later, the neighborhood started to look like itself again. Ice melted into dirty piles along the curb. The plows finally came through like an apology. Kids rode bikes in circles, testing the pavement like it had betrayed them. You could hear garage doors opening and closing, the ordinary life returning in little pieces. On Saturday, my neighbor Earl hosted a cookout like he always did when the weather broke, nothing fancy. A couple of folding tables, a cooler full of sodas, hot dogs and burgers on the grill, the smell of charcoal and thawed ground mixing together like a reset button. I brought a bag of buns and showed up early to help him set up. Earl grunted at me like that was his version of a hug. "You good?" he asked. "I'm good," I said. "How's your place?" He nodded toward the street. "Dry, warm, normal, good." People drifted in slowly. Some I knew well. Some I only recognized from HOA meetings and mailboxes. Conversations started cautious weather school closures, broken branches, then eventually circled the thing nobody could fully forget. What happened at the hearing, a woman asked quietly, not wanting to sound like she was gossiping. "They made the HOA fix the system," someone answered before I could. "Real backup. Independent." "About time," another man muttered. I didn't jump into those conversations. I stayed by the grill, flipping burgers, letting the talk move around me like wind. I wasn't interested in winning the neighborhood. I was interested in living in it. After lunch, I walked past the clubhouse on my way home and stopped at the bulletin board. The old water advisory was gone. In its place was a clean, fresh sheet, straight stapled neatly, no crooked corners. HOA newsletter update. Emergency preparedness. I scanned it, expecting spin. What I found was strangely plain. They announced the installation of a compliant independent backup system for the pumps. They listed inspection dates. They mentioned revised emergency procedures. They used careful language, no blame, no grandstanding. And there, halfway down the page, was a new rule in bold: emergency generator exemption. During declared outages or emergency conditions, residents may operate generators for essential home use without HOA enforcement of quiet hours. I read the sentence twice. It was short. It was factual. It was exactly what should have existed before any storm ever hit. Behind me, footsteps crunched on gravel. A man I recognized from the Zoom call, the one with the veteran cap, stopped beside me and read the same notice. He didn't look at me at first. He just nodded slightly, like he was checking a box in his head. Then he leaned closer, voice low enough that it wouldn't carry. "Finally, someone fought back," he said. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a simple statement, like he'd been waiting years to say it out loud in this neighborhood. I turned my head. "I didn't fight," I said. "I followed their rules." He gave a short, quiet laugh. "Yeah," he replied. "That's the part that scares them." He walked off without another word, hands in his pockets, shoulders a little lighter than before. That evening, I went into the garage and looked at my generator. It sat exactly where it always sat, clean, ready, not a trophy. A tool, like my wrenches on the bench, like the spare fuses in the drawer, like the paperwork folder I'd started keeping on the shelf labeled HOA in black marker. I ran my palm over the top, feeling the cool metal. No vibration, no urgency, just potential resting. Outside, the neighborhood was calm, streetlights on, windows glowing, people living. I reached down, closed the generator's cover, and heard the simple, satisfying sound as it latched. Clack. Then I turned off the garage light, pulled the door down behind me, and walked back into a warm house that didn't need to prove anything anymore. When the posted order went up at the clubhouse, stamped and dated, the noise finally stopped. Not because someone was silenced, but because the system was corrected. At the next community meeting, the determination letter was read into the record, and the board accepted responsibility in plain language, with no threats left to hide behind. The demand that once pressed me became the evidence that set things right, and the fix now belongs to everyone. Finally, someone fought back. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. If you've ever been cornered by authority, remember this: follow the rules, carefully document everything, and let the C-Cord do the work.